Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, we see this with customer. It's not such a big issue in the UK, but if you go to the continent, the unions are on the fence immediately if you say, well, we give you now a consumer-based service or any time on with that mobile device. And you face a lot of opposition from unions because they fear that in particular people that are not necessarily in the higher earnings professional area, that they, the company misuses that kind of, ability to send everybody an email and expect them to respond on a Saturday evening or something like that,
Okay. Anne-Marie?
What I was thinking there is that an interesting example which I heard the last few weeks were, because we talk about, our staff choosing the device and, the BYOD. I heard one of the things that BT have done recently with their field engineers is that they needed to replace the devices that the field engineers, by thousands of them that are out on the road servicing all of their customers. But what they did, I thought their approach was different in that the IT team had a whole series of different workshops with different engineers with all the different devices, Android devices, Apple devices, Windows devices, and they also had, as it turned out, an early Windows 8 prototype. And it was really the decision to the engineers to choose what platform or what is the device that they would roll out. And it was very, as the CIO said, it was quite a scary, process as well, because not really knowing. But we were empowering the engineers to say, you make the choice, and we will enable the best choice for you. And I thought that was a very interesting approach. As it turned out, they actually did choose, the Windows and the Windows 8 in the 2000s. Their engineers currently using Windows 8 Slate devices and are ruggedized devices out on the road. But I thought I hadn't really heard of it been, managed in that way, where the IT team have taken the team and very much said, what is it, the device you want to use, and then we'll actually enable it. I thought that was quite interesting.
Thank you.
Raj, I have a case study actually. Something that I did about, I think it was 15 years ago, it feels longer, and it was even before we knew it was consumerization, but I was working at a large telco, and the requirement was at the time we needed to enable a workforce of almost 10,000 people to be able to connect from home and outside working hours. And at the time, if you remember, sort of over 10 years ago, we didn't have laptops, we had desktops. And obviously the first option was, well, we need to buy everybody a laptop. And the cost for that was quite a lot. So the decision that we actually made was we actually built a thin client architecture where all we did was give every one of these users a two-factor authentication card, and they could then connect from home, from anywhere that they needed to. And so that was even before we knew it was consumerization. But I think, if we want to talk about cost savings, that demonstrated massive cost savings compared with the alternative.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to open up now to you, the audience, for your questions to the panel. If you could say your name, your company name, and wait for the microphone, which is possibly coming your way. But over to you guys. Any questions or comments? Over here, if you want to wait for the microphone, which might be making its way to you. No, it's not. Never mind. Okay, speak loudly, shout. Please. Yeah. All right. Oh, yeah. Oh.
Excellent. Microphone as well. Question for you. I'm looking at all the aspects of consumerization you describe, and I think it's fascinating hearing each of your responses. The thing that I'm concerned about at the moment is when we talk about protection of data, and we talk about social media starting to replace email, and we talk about people using their own devices. So, and you use the words protect your own data. What I haven't yet seen is a clear sort of view from anyone really about how do we make sure we secure that data as we get into the world of using social media within companies. So where we start to replace straight email with community-based conversations, community-based blogging, community-based document sharing. How are you approaching that within your companies to secure that data? What are you using? What seals it for you?
Right. Anne-Marie, do you want to start?
I think one of the things that goes back to the employee education is really important as well. So for within Microsoft, the whole social media is a really important way for us to not even just to market to our customers, but engage with our customers and engage with the developer communities, et cetera, and with our customers and get real-time feedback. So we, and have done over the number of years, really embrace that. I think, once again, going back to the education piece in really, ensuring that our staff are aware of what are the recommended guidelines and for how you should engage. Excuse me. How you should engage in the social media world. So we're very, very clear, having very simple policies and very simple ways of doing that. And once again, going back and helping them to ensure that they have a key role and responsibility in doing that. So I think, is that in the way that you, to your question, does that?
I'm not talking about the social media.
Sorry.
Thank you. I'm not talking about externally. I mean within the company. As people stop emailing and we become more and more community based. I mean, the Microsoft world, you're at the SharePoint 2013 Yammer space. So as you get into that Yammer space and you start to transact with your colleagues in that very different way, it's in that space. It's the bit that you look to the future on. And
I think actually it's interesting because in the few months that we have, since we've acquired Yammer, I have seen, and a number of my colleagues, a decrease in email in Microsoft, which is quite a phenomenon for because we are have always been an email-driven company. So I think what we've done as well, from a SharePoint perspective as well, is how do we, enable people to find the information and access the information they need by accessing the experts that they need to. So it is a phenomenon that we're learning from as well, and seeing that shift from education to more in the online from an internal perspective. So it's interesting, and I'd say we are at a stage where we're learning about that.
Stefan, did you have
yeah, we live and breathe the cloud. So we use Google Apps internally. That's messaging, that's document sharing, and it's in the cloud. Here, the same rule set applies like with email. You don't share documents if you're not sure you should share it, right? You don't send an email to somebody with confidential information. Hence, you wouldn't share a document with somebody outside the company. There's a warning coming up. Are you sure you want to share this with that person that is outside your domain? And then you click yes, and you can share documents with the rest of the world because it's cloud-based. On Google+, and I think there were learnings a little bit from the past, from an early predecessor Plus, where things leaked out, and it's very easy, in particular with the new user interface, even to the smartest employees, that they make mistakes and post things to circles that shouldn't receive these things. So that's a locked down system. You can't post outside the company. And because it's too easy and the new user interface, as said, is too confusing at times, so things can happen. That's why they locked it down. So it's a combination of actually, hard kind of physical or software constraints that are built up and a lot of policy and actually good communication from senior management around what is allowed and what isn't allowed or shouldn't be done. Yeah.
Simon, do you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to add, we've got our own social collaboration environment internally, but the biggest question that is coming up is not, there's obviously quite a struggle to get people from email into that, in terms of that ability to share. They're so used to backwards and forwards with email. But the biggest question is coming up really is why do I have to use two? Why do I have to use one internally, one externally? I want to use one, why can't I use a Facebook equivalent? All of those usual discussions. So we're trying to, through education, understand how people should interact. But also we want to be in a position where you can use one tool to share both internally and externally. So they've only got one interface to use, and it's relatively straightforward.
Okay. Dave,
So from our perspective, so we have we've got a CRM system internally which has its system Chatter. So many of you will remember it. I hate the name because I don't like people saying when I say what are you doing, I'm logging into Chatter. So I think we should rename it for a start and call it Get Something Done. At least when they told me I'm logging in to get something done, I'll probably feel happier. But when I look at that environment, I actually think it's tightening the security a little bit in relation to email. Because from our perspective right now, it is a closed internal circuit. It is a closed internal group. The users that are in there are on our corporate directories. It's all active-based, so we can't introduce other people. And one of the critical things of email has always been the blessing of auto-completion and the addition of the person you didn't mean to send the damn thing to in the first place and all those kind of things. And people have that experience a lot. So I see it in one sense as actually the internal social group drive potentially a tightening. I then think it comes back to the employee education. So back to there is an element of accountability, which is don't share what you shouldn't be sharing. We do confidentiality markings on documents and all those kind of things, but it's not at the point I would say right now where it is then system implemented to protect. So if you were to stick on a document that inside it had confidential, proprietary or whatever it may be, it doesn't scan the document and say this is what this is therefore not an appropriate forum. So I think we can get to that. What I do see also in the social and collaboration space though is the definition of smaller groups. And so I do see it reducing a certain amount of the email noise, and we're in the earlier stage, I think, really of starting to drive it out. So I do see it driving that. I see it driving a greater amount of collaboration in the organization, the sharing of documents actually in slightly tighter communities. We haven't got the challenge yet of people saying, why can't I use it with the external world? I think they're happy to be using it to a great extent to team more effectively inside, but I see that as a challenge that will come at some point, because we're a heavily partnered organization. So how do we do something where the group actually includes 2 or 3 of our partners? Yeah. How do we integrate them into the things that we want to circulate and keep those things confidential? So I don't think I think it's a valid concern. I think it comes down to a combination of data classification, employee trust, employee training. And inherently, I think in all of these systems, the reality is the human will always be the thing you'll never control. So I think for all the system controls things you'll put in place, if the human wants to share it with the wrong person, they'll print it. They'll take it on a key. All the classic things that we talk about around how security breaches tend to happen. So we're seeing we're seeing productivity benefits from it, and I do see the social piece actually tightening security slightly in the short term rather than loosening it.
Interesting. Raj, any additional points from you?
Yeah, so I think it's threefold, and my colleagues obviously have mentioned the importance of the education part, but also there are controls that can be put in, and some of those controls are reactive. So the ability to be able to go after the event, the ability to be able to scan, to be able to determine, why did you share this document? That's important. But also there are proactive controls, and Stefan and I met last year and we were talking about a customer who actually have 2 connections to their environment. One connection is to a secure intranet, so it's a government site, and the other connection is to a service that Google provides online. And some of the proactive controls that they were doing was, the ability to be able to scan documents as it goes up into the public cloud to ensure that it doesn't circumvent policy. And we're already seeing that in the consumer world today, where we've managed to implement DLP technologies into family protection software. So when children are talking on an instant message session, we can ensure that personal data, for example, isn't communicated to third parties. So I think it's kind of like a threefold approach, I'd say.
Thank you. Further question?
There's this gentleman here.
Sorry, very front. Sorry, Daniel.
Thanks. Just come back from Apps World, and what's really impressive, I think, is the amount of corporate apps, which very quick, easy to download, but also the skunk works. There's a lot of other apps which you can just download. What are your approaches to the apps? Because that's going beyond the data now. That's really going into very much how we work.
Raj, do you want to start?
There's a can of worms there, isn't there? So yeah, I'm probably the best exponent of that, where I have a corporate device and my children install, how to make a cake or fairy dressing up on a corporate device. we can talk about education, we can talk about governance, we can talk about policy, but we all know that people circumvent policy, and there is a need to implement and enforce stronger controls. One of the areas that certainly we're working on internally is the ability to be able to provide, in the first instance, additional assurance with regard to those applications. So some sort of seal of approval. So to be able to say, well, actually, this particular application has gone through a degree of governance or, some sort of testing to ensure that at the very least, it doesn't have any sort of particular vulnerabilities within that. But I think sort of moving forward, one of the areas that you'll start to see is the ability for administrators to not only manage devices, so you have a lot of technology solutions which manage devices, so remote lock and wipe and so forth, but also the ability to be able to enforce the applications or the ability to be able to whitelist certain applications and block certain applications. I'd anticipate probably broader from a CIO's perspective though, some of the issues and challenges that you may face in the future would be, well, what happens when those devices are consumer devices? Can you actually really be able to enforce the level of assurance or security that you want on these applications if they're a consumer device? And you kind of see that in the world today, where if you have a consumer device that's being used in the enterprise with the authorization of the enterprise, what happens when that user leaves?